You're welcome to the two-man wall with Johnny Ward and Adam Russell. Let's get straight to it. There's so much anger in the room, so much happiness in the room, so much hope in the room, and so much, flabbergasted people in the room at the fall and rise and fall of the Super League over the course of 2 days, and what this might mean for football and what it might mean for a working class game, maybe just taking back itself to the roots of the game and kind of giving the two fingers to people who basically want to run it for themselves. Adam Russell, what have you made of it all?
I was worried that we weren't going to have much to talk about this week. To be honest, it's not really much happened this week, has there? Yeah, I don't
Somebody
know.
said on Twitter, Jose Mourinho was sacked. That seems like about 2 years ago.
Jose Mourinho, I must have missed that. That
Indeed.
was another bit of news that was swept under the carpet, I assume. But yeah, it's been. I don't know. I don't think I've ever been more ashamed of football as a game potentially than I have this week. It's brought out some of the real ugly sides of English football in particular, but obviously European football more generally. And I hope that nobody kids themselves that this is the end of the process and this is issue solved now that the clubs have obviously backed down under pressure. Because to me, it feels like it needs to be the start and the genesis of a revolution of English football in particular and how it's run. We can't go on the way things currently are. It's clear that there's an issue, and the Super League is obviously just more a general kind of amalgamation of that problem. It's yeah, like I say, it's flabbergasted is the word for it. And right, to my mind, I'm just going to go for it because I think today's about looking at this problem and saying, okay, well, how do we fix it? What are the, and I guess that starts with what are the issues in English football? And I think I've tried to nail it down to three issues. So I'm just going to go from there, mate. And I guess the first is obvious given the things that have gone on, is rogue ownership of English football clubs. It's a bigger problem than just the big six in the Premier League. We've seen it from the likes of Wigan, Bury, Blackburn, Charlton, Watford, Bolton. The Football League and the Premier League's fit and proper persons test is not only unfit for purpose, but the consequence of that has been the demise of a Football League club that entered the league in 1894 and dozens more on the way to following them. Wigan are at risk of dropping into League Two because their former owner may have put them into administration for the sake of a bet. And whilst the owners at this level are chasing the Premier League level, are chasing the big dream of the Champions League, these owners are chasing a very different dream. The Premier League owners are the only dream that they have is to make a profit from football, because no one's that's the golden goose in football. No one's figured out how to actually do that as an owner yet, and that's the dream that they're chasing. And the discourse now is moving towards, after last night, is moving towards, well, let's not punish the players. Any points deductions, competition removals will be punishing the players, and that's not fair. Well, how do you punish the owner of a football club without punishing the football club? Birmingham City last year were docked 9 points under the fair play rules for signing a right back for £2 million. And sure, that punished the team as a whole for a decision made at board level, but how else do you do it? Bolton were deducted 12 points, even though for going into the administration under the administration rules, which is completely fair enough. But the ownership had changed, the management structure had changed, and the entire team had changed, and we were still docked 12 points. And yeah, it punished the current players, but that's just how it works. Unfortunately, when a club owner does something wrong, the club has to be punished. And in terms of what we can do about rogue ownership, the fit and proper persons test needs to be revamped following a full national review into ownership of English football clubs. And if it's feasible for us to implement a German style 50+1 fan ownership system in this country, then now is the time. It needs to be done. Fans are the only way to ensure that the best interests of not only the club itself, but also the wider interests of the game are being followed at all times. And the second problem is a complete and unfair distribution of wealth between the top leagues and the lower leagues. Last season, Norwich obviously finished bottom, and they made the smallest amount of Premier League TV revenue. They made £95 million in TV revenue, and that was the lowest amount in the Premier League. Championship clubs in that same season received an average of £8 to £12 million in TV revenue. And while the Premier League parachute payments continue to supplement the teams that come down from the Premier League, the gap between the teams that have come down and the teams that are already in the Championship will get bigger every season, and we'll end up with a league in the Championship where the same 5 or 6 teams go up on a cycle. You can see it with Norwich and Watford this year. They've come down, they've got bigger budgets, bigger squads, better players, and they can jump straight back up into the Premier League, and that gap becomes bigger. The amount of money to try and bridge that gap between those teams becomes even bigger, and the money it takes to bridge that gap becomes bigger, and this cycle continues. And this means there's only 2 models of ownership in the Championship now. It means you either live within your means and you become uncompetitive, or you overspend chasing the Premier League dream and the riches that come with it. Now, last week, I think it was a week ago today, Reading announced their 1920 accounts, and they'd spent 211% of their total revenue on wages alone. And apparently to them, that was a good thing, because the season before they'd spent 226% on wages. Now, the owner of Reading needs only to get bored with propping them up with his money and loans and all that, and they'll be in a
house card collapse.
Yeah, exactly. And it's happened to countless clubs. It happened to us. It's happened, and it will happen to more clubs unless we address this issue. There will be a complete football league bust. And like I say, we'll end up with the same 25, 26, 27 teams in the Premier League year after year after year. And make no mistake about that, because of that, the Premier League standard will suffer. And then it's not just all about owners and about the clubs. I think one of the biggest problems, and it's ultimately the reason we're in this mess in the first place, is mismanagement at the corporate level of the game. And I think this has been shown clearer than anything else how out of touch the people at the top of the game and the people running the game truly are with the fans and how they feel. This whole sorry episode stems from UEFA's insistence on trying to revamp the Champions League so that they can have more games, more revenue, they can fill more TV slots, and they can make more money. And the Champions League is probably the one decision UEFA have made in the last 3 decades, the current format, and it's probably the one thing fans universally agree on, that they like the format and that it produces drama and it produces excitement. But their insistence on trying to make more money is the reason that the Super League came about in the first place, because the big clubs looked at it and said, we don't agree with this. We don't want to play more games. And what we now have, and obviously now the Super League is gone, is we'll now have a 36-team Champions League format with 225 total games, which is 100 more than they currently have. A stupid league format where you play 10 different teams once, either home or away, and 2 slots saved for big clubs that fail to qualify on merit, which is the exact argument people have been making against the Super League, is that it's against competition. And as much as ownership is an issue, UEFA, FIFA, the FA, the Premier League, the Football League, all have countless cases to answer to for toothless management on so many issues, whether it be racism, illegal transfers, crazy agent fees, or corruption of the organizations themselves. Trust in them is at an all-time low from both fans and clubs. And ultimately, that's the reason why the clubs decided to make a Super League, because they don't trust that UEFA have their best interests at heart. And unless we can reform those organizations as well, or find a way to rebuild public faith in these organizations, then more power will end up in the hands of the big clubs. And once again, we'll end up in a situation where the big clubs have got all the power and the people that own them can basically run the game, and we'll end up in this exact same situation in 3 years' time.
Yeah, I think that's very profound, Adam. I think in fairness to the game in England, I think it'll be a lot better for what's happened over the last 2 days. And it's so encouraging to see fans revolt the way that they have, because, as somebody who supports the game in Ireland, it's much more locally run. It's much more grassroots, and English fans who come over to games here just love, that it's just much more kind of rooted in the local area. Whereas English football has lost its way in terms of ownership, I think. And I imagine fans over time will get disenfranchised. And if it's a case where TV money is going to dictate everything, football's going to be in a very bad place, because if you're a team in Liverpool or you're a team in Wigan, who cares anymore? It just doesn't matter. You know, what's your identity to the local area? And the revolt against this from some personalities, but mainly from fans, I think, has been hugely encouraging. And maybe it was working class football trying to take the game back, because I do not see what the likes of Roman Abramovich, Qatari owners, Arab owners, I don't really see what good this is for the game. It's going to just make some footballers richer, a lot of agents very richer. It's going to disenfranchise fans, and it's going to take the game away from where it was and where it always has been. And I think fans maybe have got their voice back to an extent this week.
And yeah, and I think the biggest problem with it is that no one really has the power at the minute to do anything about the owners. The legislation on the football side is just not there to prevent them buying the clubs. If they've got the money, if they can prove they've got the funds, and they can put a half-baked effort into saying that they have the club's best interests at heart, then it's pretty clear now that the EFL and the Premier League will let them buy our football clubs. And as much as I hate to rely on current government, I suspect that the only way we can really reform the game the way we need to is for a government intervention. And it's going to be difficult to wrestle back the power from these owners, because they won't give it up lightly. And their ultimate aim was and always has been to make as much money in the American and the Chinese markets from football. They've tried to do it with the MLS and the Chinese Super League. They tried to turn those into leagues that had the same kind of pull and made the same kind of money as the Premier League. Failing that, plan B is to just hijack the Premier League. And we would have seen in the Super League that, yeah, sure, they would have played some games at Old Trafford and Anfield, but before too long, Liverpool would have been playing home matches in New York, and the Man City group would have been playing matches in one of their 11 venues that they've now owned across the world. And it was so clear as day to fans that what will be the biggest shame to me is if we don't take advantage of this opportunity to really make the game better and to give fans a real say into how the game is run week in, week out. And there is hope. We've seen with clubs like Portsmouth, who obviously are not under fan ownership anymore, but they went through a fan ownership period, and they came out stronger because of it. They came out of it a more united club, and the fan ownership models are there. It's just whether the rich and the powerful will let us wrestle those powers back. But it will be a real shame if we all just go on pretending that everything's fine now. I saw that sign Mbappe is trending on Twitter from fans of clubs saying to their owners, well, you sign Mbappe in the summer, we'll forgive you for this little sorry episode. And that in there lies the problem. And essentially what these owners are relying on is that ultimately the fans will come round to their way of thinking after time. And yeah, like I say, I hope it's a day that we look back on in the future as the day that we really started this change. But I maybe won't hold my breath.
Yeah, I would be hopeful, I think. And it's kind of like the workers of the world unite. You know, the fan in Galway, like me, is the same as the fan in Liverpool. He just supports a better football team, but we're basically from a working class background of supporting a football team, going to games, spending a not stupid amount of money to see our team, and being able to relate to that team through our father and through our upbringing. And I don't think that has changed. And I that's what I'm really encouraged about. I mean, the interesting thing from your perspective, Adam, you're a Bolton fan, but like the amount of teams in that general region that have gone through so much turmoil in terms of ownership is staggering.
Well, I think it's the area itself. Obviously, we went through a glory period, maybe in the Premier League glory era itself in those sort of late 2000s, early 2000s. And as a result of the exposure of that, those clubs attracted investment from far and wide. And again, a lot of the time that investment didn't always come with the best interests of the club at heart. It was more the best interests of the investors. And we've been victims to that. But I think Wigan, for me, Bolton was a case of mismanagement over a long time. We didn't spend within our means. And yeah, sure, we had some rogue owners later in the process, but what really happened was we overspent during the Premier League years. But what's happened to Wigan is just a scandal. It's outrageous. Essentially, their owner put them into it. There's alleged that their owner had a large bet on them with his casino that they would be relegated from the Championship. And when it looked like they were going to stay up, he put them into administration to get the points deduction and see them in League One. And it looks like they could even be relegated to League Two. And the EFL have a power, they're toothless. They have no power to do anything in this situation. So we need to start. It's not just about the owners. It's not just about the players. It's not just about the agents. It's also about the organisations that run the game. And we have to start there as well.
The game does go on. We have a League Cup final between the Manchester Blue and the London Whites, as you put it in your notes. Before all that, the Spurs situation. Now, you're telling me here, Brendan Rodgers, you like him at 4-1. Has Rodgers not more or less ruled himself out of this job?
Yeah, I'm not sure that means anything, though, really, does it? The one that I've been hearing this morning that I quite like as a shout that I didn't mention in my notes that we discussed yesterday was Scott Parker. Obviously, an ex-Spurs player, has got Fulham playing nice football. They may or may not stay up, but I think he's impressed people with how his calm demeanor and the way he speaks, and his passion and the way his team plays has also impressed people. So he is in the market, isn't he? I think he was 16. I'm just getting it up in front of me. Yeah,
Nagelsmann 9-4, Rodgers 4-1. Ryan Mason, obviously, as you say, possession 9-10 to law. He's the incumbent at the moment, 12-1. It's a tough one to call after Jose Mourinho second. But yeah, the Parker one isn't maybe as left field as it would sound.
No, and I think, like you say, possession is 9/10 of the law for Ryan Mason at 12-1. I think at 12-1, it's worth a punt simply because he could win a major trophy in his second game in charge. He's young, came through the Spurs academy, obviously played for Spurs. He speaks well. And obviously, if he was to win them the League Cup and then take them into the top four, it's going to be quite difficult for them to not give him the job, even though he is young and he doesn't have that experience. So that's obviously what will count against him. But at 12s, I think it's a good price. And yeah, Rodgers, I think he's obviously a top-class manager. I think we all know that. We saw even what he did at Liverpool. He did a good job at Liverpool, I think. And then he did at Celtic. And then what he's done at Leicester, I think, is probably his most impressive job to date. He's almost kind of a club that he's failed at. He did well at Swansea, did well at Liverpool, did well at Celtic, did well at Leicester. So I think a top club. I was surprised that Chelsea didn't look at him when they brought Tuchel in, to be honest, given his connection with the club already. So yeah, a top club will take a chance on Rodgers at some point. It's just whether the timing would. Is Tottenham the right club? If you were Leicester manager at this point, would you consider it a step forward to manage Tottenham?
It is a tricky one. It was a bit like kind of, we had the debate when Matt Doherty left Wolves to go to Spurs. Was it a good move? Was it a bad move? It hasn't worked out for him. And I think, in fairness to Rodgers, as much as he did leave Celtic, I think he probably does have a bit of loyalty to Leicester. I think he's a decent man as well. And he would leave Leicester with reluctance. It's going to be an interesting one for Spurs. I think what hasn't surprised me is that the Mourinho thing just completely backfired. And I think they need to hold their hands up there and say they got this badly wrong, because Mourinho is a busted flush, I think, at this stage. I don't know where he's going to go, but does this influence the League Cup final in the sense of Spurs are 5-1, which is kind of a vaguely attractive price in some respects. City's dream of the four-timer is obviously gone now. And in fairness to Spurs, like, they have the players. I think they've suffered a bit of a malaise in terms of just Mourinho's tactics and inability to hold on to a lead. But I'd almost be tempted by 5-1 against City with that little spurt that they might get from the change of manager. What do you think of it?
I think they'll both, a lot of anxiety will be relieved on both sides by not having to play a small, tiny club and the indignation of having to not play an elite club. So thankfully, both of the Super League clubs have managed to make their way here. So I think that'll help. But
absolutely,
will Jose's leaving I think it's got to have an effect, hasn't it? New voice in the dugout, new voice on the training ground.
Well, if you're to believe the rumours, there was definitely, discontent in the dressing room, and I think they were annoyed that they didn't work so much on offensive plays as well, and that, which is kind of, I'm not going to say ironic, but it's funny that as much as that was a problem, Spurs actually took the lead in an awful lot of games. That's when their problems began. Maybe the shackles are off a bit here. I'd be tempted to back them at 5s because I think they're not too bad on their day.
It's an attractive price in a one-off cup final, isn't it, to take Spurs on at 5? They've got
City aren't in great form either. They just, if they're having a wobble this season, they did early on. Of late, they haven't been. Even against Dortmund, I thought they were okay as all.
No, I think it just seems that it's the League Cup final. Man City are going to win. It just seems like obviously they're going for a fourth in a row. It's their competition. I think obviously Kane came off with an injury at the weekend. Didn't he? Hobbled off.
Another ankle problem again.
Yeah, so it's whether will he be fit, and if not, that's a huge loss for Spurs, and whether they can overcome that, I question. I think City, since losing the 2013 FA Cup final against Wigan, Man City have won the last 8 finals
Unbelievable
in a row, including the Community Shield. But even so, they're proving themselves to be quite good in those one-off games. It's actually been the two-legged ties in like the Champions League that have thrown them off in those seasons. So, whereas obviously Spurs have not played in a major, not won a major final at least since the 2008 League Cup final. So they just don't have that experience in the big games like Man City do. So I think that'll come into it. You saw obviously the game with Chelsea, the semi-final on Saturday was quite a tense occasion. Chelsea were able to stop City from getting the ball into dangerous areas. So if Tottenham can kind of replicate that tactic and really frustrate them, I can see it being a low scoring game. Under 2.5s is 20-21, so not a huge price, obviously, but I think there's still maybe a bit of value to be had. I don't think it'll be a high score. I think 1-2-0 maybe either way. So I wouldn't look for goals, but
and if you
6-4.
If you do join Star, you've up to £50 free bet if there's a goal in the first 10 minutes. Just check out the website. Do we have a trader challenge this week?
You've put me on the spot there. Yes, I'm assuming we will have a trader challenge on 6 Premier League games, but check the Star Sports website for more details on that.
Yeah, that will be revealed. Anything else for the weekend, Adam? Bolton still going strong?
Yeah, it's getting a bit nervy now. Morecambe are really on the charge. We
won again last night.
Yeah, we did win again last night, but it's 1 point essentially between us and Morecambe for what looks like being the last automatic promotion spot. And yeah, being a Bolton fan, there's always that concern that we'll bottle it right at the end. So I'm not gonna say too much at this point, but another good win last night.
Thanks for your time, and great to hear such passion from a young football fan who, even as a young football fan, realizes that this can't happen, this won't happen, and that fans need a voice.